Welcome to The Divine Mess, a sanctuary where the dance of the empowered masculine and the divine feminine unfolds in all its glory. Join us as we delve into the heart of these cosmic energies, exploring their attributes and the profound impact they have on our lives. From the raw power of the masculine to the nurturing embrace of the feminine, we uncover the balance that leads to a life of abundance and joy. Our hosts, Curdy Deva Perriman and Tina Ryan, are your guides on this spiritual journey who blend science with soul to offer practical wisdom for harnessing your divine energy. We celebrate the beauty and imperfection, embracing the chaos of life's journey as a catalyst for growth. The Divine Mess isn't just a podcast, it's a movement towards wholeness and self-expression. So come laugh with us, cry with us, and grow with us. Every episode is an invitation to explore the depths of your being and to live out loud, authentically, and unapologetically. Subscribe and join our community of seekers as we support each other in this extraordinary, messy adventure we call life. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you're listening to us. Welcome to The Divine Mess. If this is the first time that you have tuned in with us, my name is Tina Marie and I'm a self-love coach, and I work with women who are moving through separation and divorce and looking to redefine their second season. And as always, I am joined by my gorgeous co-host of some thousands and thousands of episodes that it feels like what we've recorded, but truly it's not. Mr. Curdy David Perriman, who is the cosmic alchemist, and he helps you transmute fear into love. See, I got it right. I'm good at it. The owner of the Golden Temple, he is an amazing human. Just tune in, have a listen, and you'll figure it out like I did. And this week on our Divine Couch, we are joined by the gorgeous Natasha Ritz, and it's so exciting because it's third time's the charm for us. We've been delayed, we've been held over, we've had interruptions, and obviously today was meant to be the right day. So I will take the time to do a quick blurb, and then we'll get Natasha to explain all about the gorgeous things that she does for this beautiful world that we live in. She is a self-proclaimed explorer of the internal world. Oh God, this is going to be a good conversation, is it not? Souling is the first book she's written that was born from personal experience in conjunction with academic learnings from her behavioural science works. You two are going to get along like a house on fire. I can just feel it. Same. Natasha is a business leader, having run multiple businesses in social enterprise space, helping founders and leaders to bring their vision to life. She brings unique storytelling and knowledge from varied experiences in her life to support the reader on a journey of souling, of entering into their innermost self. Let's go, kids. Come on. Get cracking.
Oh, thank you both so much for having me. And yeah, both your energies are just so nice. I feel like, it's going to be great, and I feel really lucky. So thank you.
Oh, it's a pleasure to have you. So probably a good question to kick off with is, how would you define your own divine mess? What does it look like to you?
Oh, it just looks like a fucking mess, to be honest. So
yep, sounds like my life.
yeah, look, I think it's just the classic human bundle of shit that we all land in. And yeah, it's a total mess. Like I was just saying to Kitty Diva this morning that, like, you know, I it's taken me 7 months to unpack this one particular issue that I've been working on. Like, I've been doing this work for so fucking long, and you would think that it gets easier, right? And you would think you'd be able to suddenly face your emotions and face yourself and sit with yourself, but you can't. It's difficult because our brains are set up in a way for us to survive, for our egos to help us to survive. And so no matter how deep you go into the work and how much you've done, it's always difficult. It's always a fucking nightmare. And, I think that's just humanity. Like, we're all just a bloody mess all the time. And I often think when I look at people who appear to have it all together, quote unquote, and then think, nah, surely not. I don't think anyone knows what they're doing. You know, I have no idea what I'm doing. Do
We're
you?
all stumbling around in the dark waiting
Yeah,
for some bastard to turn the light on, really, aren't
that's
we?
it. That's it. And I wrote this chapter actually in my book. It's called Existential Awareness Blobs, because that's how I see us, right? We're like, you get to this level of awareness where you become aware of yourself, and then you become aware that you're aware. So you're sort of viewing or observing your sense of awareness, but we're all just these tiny, stupid little blobs blobbing around in this moment in time on this planet, in this universe, and I think and then you choose other people to kind of blob with, and then you choose kind of blobs to do work with, and then everyone's just blobbing around, and we're all so obsessed with, ourselves and our egos and money and how much we acquire and abundance and all these things. But we're all just weirdly here and conscious at this time. And it's quite a lot to kind of unpack. And I think that's why we're messy, because it's kind of bizarre. That's why religion exists, because it gives you a path to solve this mystery that is humanity, right? It's very difficult to solve that in a mind, in a simple human mind that wants to solve all the time.
Yeah, yeah, 1,000%. As I say to Dave, and I always manage to crack him up, I said, we're souls in a human meat suit. That's it. That's all it is, right? So we're endeavoring to, how was it? I read it the other day. Oh, conversations with God. We have the need to remember, like we come into these meat suits with everything, absolutely everything that we need to know, and then someone gets the duster and erases everything off the chalkboard, and then you've got to go back and start writing your lines of remembrance as to who you are and why you're here. And it just takes a bloody long time for some of us, and some of us get it in a shorter space of
Yeah.
time.
It's like, that sense of trying to find your meaning, right?
Yeah.
And it's the meaning that we place on ourselves and the meaning we place on our narrative, and why we're here at this time and what we're here for and all of those things. And sometimes you can look at it from the thought of like, nothing fucking matters. And then sometimes you can look at it, which can be very liberating, or it can be totally stifling. Or you can look at it from the other side of like, this is a deep and meaningful moment in time, and I get to be here, and just in my presence, I'm grateful for this. And we flip and flop from all these different viewpoints and narratives all the time, depending on our environment, our relationships, our work, all these things can affect how we feel and how we make meaning, or the, that value we place on the meaning we think at the time.
1,010% all the time. So my good friend's sitting over there silently just taking all of this in. So you found your voice. Come join the conversation.
Oh, I was like going on mock mode, like I was like, oh, I'm just going to observe and just be and just listen and just observe, just enjoy the moment. Why not? Because when Natasha was saying about the blob, I was thinking us like minions, like we are just like little minions and just clashing with each other with their weird language. So I was like having that image right now that we are all minions right now doing this podcast. And yeah, that's why I was like observing. But it's a great description, and I feel like Natasha's description of how messy our life can be. But I'm just curious for you, like, how do you navigate this famous question? Like our human mind always asks us, how do you do this? Or how do you navigate through this messy life?
Oh, such a great question. You know what? I always start by writing. Like, okay, so right next to me, I have this journal, which I just bought, which you're both gonna like. It's like a Kundalini vibe. And
Yeah,
it's so
it's
beautiful. It's
Kundalini
got,
awakening.
yeah, it's got this beautiful gold. Anyway, I'm obsessed with these things. And I go through like 2 or 3 journals a year, and I write most mornings I handwrite, which is a really important process of like purging, reflecting, writing down the truth of my thoughts, which can sometimes be surprising. Asking questions of myself. And so that's sort of the first thing. I also do try to write by the ocean. I'm really lucky and I live 600 meters from the beach in the northern beaches of Sydney. And there's something about the feminine beauty and I guess like volatile nature of the ocean that helps both ground me, but also put in perspective how ridiculous, small, and in a way meaningless I am, which is very helpful for me. That's a perspective that I need in order to get out of my own bullshit. So writing, nature, talking to people, like asking for help, which is often really hard, because I'm also, my ego is like, you're an independent woman, you don't need anyone to help you. But that's my little stupid voice. That's not actually helpful. Like you do need help and you do need people. So I've got a lovely support system of family, friends, coaches. I've seen psychologists, psychotherapists, all sorts of different kind of people to help guide me. And then I've also tried other more holistic methods like breath work, sound, movement, and things like acupuncture. I've also explored the spaces of sex, kink, and tantra to face, any sexual shame things that I've had to work through. So I've kind of played in lots of modalities. And because life is such a fucking wild mess, I do think that just trying stuff to figure out what works for you is helpful, because not every modality is going to be a gateway for you. It may not work. And like, for example, therapy is just not for everyone. It's one of the main things that people talk about all the time is like talk therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, all of these things. But that is actually not helpful for trauma that sits in the body. Like you can't talk your way out of that shit. You've got to face it in a physical manner, which can be breath work, or it could be fascia release. There's just so many approaches that can be taken. And I think I've tried so many of them to see what works, and some of them do and some of them don't.
I feel like nowadays we have so many options that people get confused by which one to go to. Like, did this happen ever to you? Like, because there's so many options, like you said, like to deal with trauma, for example. If we just focus, for example, on trauma, just one thing. And in trauma itself, there's so many layers. But do you feel like there are too many options out there? How do you see that?
Yeah, look, I think it's not about there being too many options out there. I think it's just that in our humanity, when there are so many options, we can stagnate on a choice. But I think that once you can kind of access your intuition, which is another whole thing in itself, because we really struggle because we've been taught not to and previously been burned at the stake for accessing our intuition. So the intergenerational trauma from that is fucking wild. But once you can try, sort of access your intuition, if you can read about certain modalities and you feel drawn to that, then that is likely helpful. If you feel, but then at the same time, if you feel a bit repelled from something, then you could ask yourself the question, what am I avoiding, or what am I trying not to face by not trying that? Or, there's a lot of ways to look at things, but I think often the one that we feel pulled to is a good test to try. But there's also no harm, like if you're in indecision, then to just say, okay, well, get yourself into a bit of a masculine space, write yourself 3 choices that you can look at and book one for each month in the so take some action and step into your masculine to allow yourself to do that. But again, like understanding masculine, feminine energy is a whole thing in and of itself. accessing feminine energy is really challenging. And all of these things take time. So I guess it's like, I don't know, having a bit of patience, a bit of grace with yourself around where you're at in your healing and in your journey, and also knowing that your healing's kind of forever. Like, you're never healed.
It's a bit of a misnomer, isn't it? You know, like people will, oh, I healed myself, and I'm like, you healed that layer or that level, that piece of cake that you've just kind of like sliced off to the top of yourself. Talk to me in another 6 months when it comes around and bites you on the ass again. Then we can have a real conversation, because Dava and I have had those conversations where I said, I thought I worked this shit out. I thought I, worked all this nonsense out about, myself and my ex-husband and the reasons why I was with him and all the rest of it. And it still comes up and bites me on the butt. And I haven't been in the same household physical space as him for over 8 years. But it's still going, oh, right, excellent. Thank you for that big piece of learning. I'll take that one on board and just move on. But in terms of your journey, where did that actually start for you? Like, were you one of these beautiful people that was raised in a holistic space from the time you were like 3 or 4, and mum did yoga and ate natural food and all that stuff? Or was it just like, I'm a McDonald's kid and I'm running with the pack and I'm riding my BMX and life is grand, and then you get slammed into a wall and you go, oh shit, now I've got something to deal with?
Yeah. No, I grew up in I don't know, a pretty normal home. Like, both my parents worked really hard. They definitely weren't spiritual in any way. Dad was an atheist. We have Jewish roots, so both my parents are Jewish, and actually my entire family line also. But we were not religious, and I guess we had like traditions that Judaism has in some ways. And yeah, my childhood was actually lovely. It was very supportive, but it was pretty normal. Like, went to school, did all those things. I was quite a active kid, so I did martial arts and I did horse riding and I did netball and things like that. But we weren't a spiritual home, although my parents were pretty far ahead of their time with the work that they did on themselves. So they had quite a lot of therapy to work on their own things so that they could create a really beautiful home for us. And so they used therapy as their tool, and that set us up for, I guess, a lot of awareness and self-reflection and accountability in our home. Where my biggest sort of, I suppose, first major trauma kind of happened was actually when I was 26, and I had come out of a relationship that I'd been in since I was 15. So it's a very formative relationship. It was a high school sweetheart relationship, and it ended really, really badly with deception and, betrayal and all sorts of things. And the first year after that, I sunk myself into work to avoid any kind of pain, to avoid working on it. I literally worked, I think, one time like 13 days in a row, and that actually ended up bursting out of my body in the emotions that I had been trying to escape. And yeah, I think so. That first year was really challenging, and then for the following 7 years, I had really dug into all of my own things to understand, why I created that scenario, what level of accountability I needed to take for the breakdown of that relationship. And the things that I uncovered have been so wild, so far beyond what I ever could have imagined, because it's so much easier to point your finger at the other person and say, fuck you, you did this to me, how could you, I'm a good person. And your ego wants to do all that, right? Because you want to elevate yourself as a better person. But the truth is you're not. And so when you have to face all of that stuff, and some of the stuff for me was really like around, I had wanted to leave that relationship at 18, for example, but I chose to completely self-sacrifice and stay in it because I felt that he needed me. And so what I did in that time, so from 18 to 26, my body was in a no, but I had committed to this yes that I thought that I needed to follow through with. And in that sort of commitment and my level of accountability, which was this value that my family had, you know, commitment and accountability, I had gone so far up the extreme of not listening to myself, kicking my inner child to the curb, totally self-sacrificing, but also with a guise of I'm an empath, you know, and I'm helping him, and all this bullshit that I created an entire narrative around that I didn't know until probably 3 years ago, that I was actually in a no. I did not want to be with him. And because of that, that led us down a path of all sorts of awful and negative behaviors. And on reflection, had I have known all of that, or had I have listened to myself and not tried to logic my way into accountability, quote unquote, my life would have been really different. But, you know, I also, like, I do think that I regret that decision, and I think regrets are okay as well. But I also have learned so much from that. And I've learned about what's okay for me. I've learned about you know, wanting to be chosen and doing anything that I can to be chosen by someone, you know, and often choosing very narcissistic people, or people who gaslight, or people who drive up my dopamine when I feel suddenly chosen by them, you know. And so dating was a really interesting self-reflective time. And yeah, it's just been a huge, huge learning curve, and a total mess. It's a total shit show.
I completely understand about where you've said at 18, you were saying no, because I had a moment in time with my ex-husband. We were literally just married. And I stood in my kitchen and I was just, what did I do? Like, you know, and that was sort of like into our entire relationship. That was 6 years in. And, you know, it was almost like the minute the ring went on the finger, his mindset for what I was responsible for radically changed. You know, that all of a sudden I was there to baby him and to do all the work and to take care of everything, and there was no reciprocation. But then, you know, I had this drummed in my head from when I was a kid. When you're married, it's a lifelong commitment. You've made a commitment. You've stood in front of 100 people. You said that you will cherish and love and honor and better and worse and sickness, health, all the jazz. And, you know, here I am at 24 years of age and going, I've made you know, a bit like you're saying, the brain and the logic is going, yes, 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 you've made this commitment. And the body's going, what are you doing? Crazy woman. And I wouldn't change it because he was the biggest teacher in my life. For, you know, and for all the things that I am now, I would never have been had I had not traveled through that relationship with him and begun to do my own healing work not long after my second son was born. And then realizing how radically different we thought from one another, and what our, you know, concepts on relationships and parenting and all the things that you kind of ignore when you love somebody, that then you kind of see, oh, hang on, where was the guidance and where was all the questions when you started the relationship? Like, there was never any of these, here's 50 good questions to ask somebody when you first start dating them, or, what's your concepts around money, and what's your concepts around children and how they should be raised, and kids going to school, and what's your concept on religion and spirituality, and all the stuff. It was just like, oh, I love him and I want to get married. You just don't ask yourself any of those sorts of questions. But having learned and being a little bit more experienced now, there are a lot of the questions that, because my partner and I got together and then sort of COVID came in. So that was our opportunity while we couldn't be together, were all of these questions that we could throw at each other to have a level of understanding as to what was important and what wasn't important. And, we dated sort of via text for quite some time before we actually went on a physical date. And that was really good too, because you got a sense of who the person was before you dipped your toe in a little bit further into that pool, which can be a little bit freaky and frightening after 20 plus years of not really ever, I had a couple of dates, and then you meet the person that you marry, and then it's like, oh, okay, I think, and oh, thank God I never have to do that again. And then you step into it and you're mid 40s and you're like, shit, I don't know what the rules are. It's so very, very different to how, and then moving into all of these concepts about understanding about masculine and feminine energy. And when I was in the relationship, spending so much time in the masculine. I was the organizer. I got everything done. I took care of the kids. I ran the house. There was no time for me to ever just to stop and go, oh, he's got it. He's got me. I don't have to have all the balls juggling in the air at the moment. It's all okay. So after you've done all this process of working all this sort of stuff out for yourself, how have you found moving and dating again? And do you ask better questions?
Oh, yes. I think, well, like, first to sort of frame this, I think probably one of the biggest things in sort of this healing journey, which is still ongoing, it's been almost 8 years for me, and it's still ongoing. The biggest thing was for me to forgive myself. So it wasn't actually, it was so easy to forgive him. It was so easy, but to forgive myself took for fucking ever. It was like, I just was so angry with my choices, and I was so angry with how I behaved and what I did and what I didn't do. And, and it took so long. And then finally, when I was able to forgive myself, and I was able to really deeply look at myself in the eyes, look myself in the mirror, and just really be present with my own humanity, and that it's all right to fuck things up, and, that was okay. That's when I was able to find a little bit of freedom to just enjoy life, enjoy each moment. And dating's been really interesting, right? Like, I think when I first started dating, I was so desperate to be seen, to be heard, to be desired. And I even remember having this sense of just deep desperation when I was walking down the street to catch eyes with anyone, to be seen. I was so, I think I was so humiliated and so rejected by what had happened, that it had meant that I had not seen myself, I had not heard myself, and I was really looking for that validation through other people. And that really manifested in my dating. For actually probably the first 5 or 6 years, like, I was really dating all the wrong people. And I was asking questions, but I was asking questions to keep control of the conversation. And I was asking questions to deflect from myself and my own pain. And it was really like I used my ability to be a good conversationalist and a good communicator to totally manipulate every conversation. And so it wasn't very healthy, but I also was so needy and so desperate, right? So it was just such a terrible mix um, of the mess that I'd created. And finally, I guess so I've been dating someone now. This is the longest I've dated anyone in the last 7 years, for 8 or 9 months. And he's beautiful. And I've really been specific about the choosing of this particular type of person. And it's so funny because I did so much work on myself, forgiving myself, figuring out what the right person was. And for so long, I was focused on a lot of external things that were my own problems, right? So I was focused on the way someone looked, the way they carried themselves, maybe the job they had, the house that they lived in, a lot of external factors that I felt inadequate on myself, and then I was projecting those things and attracting those kinds of people with maybe big egos, but also no self-awareness. And so when I was working through, what I was attracting, I then started to really figure out, okay, what do I actually want in terms of like a meaningful relationship? I want someone who's truly masculine. I want someone who can organize, who, can book a date and say, I'm picking you up at this time. I want someone who is kind and thoughtful. I want someone who cares about their family. I want someone who has their shit together and, knows sort of what they want their life to look and feel like. I want someone who I can trust to do things, and I don't have to always be the one to do the things. I want someone where I can relax into my feminine, because my God, it's just, I think for so long I was like in my masculine dating and trying to control and, clutching at fucking straws. But when I just released all of that, I went to Bali, I did a Tantra course, I explored my sexuality, and then started to build this view of this person, but also the relationship, the type of communication that I wanted, and then dating this lovely human. It was so different. My experience was so different. Even when I went into this next round of dating, because you're on and off the apps fucking constantly, and hate them, love them, hate them, love them. It's so ridiculous. But I went on a few different dates with different people before I met him, and they were all different kinds of people that I'd dated before. They were much nicer people. They were not these jockey fucking bulky dudes. They were just nice men who just, were quite sure of themselves, but nothing out of the ordinary. They were what you'd consider really normal people, and this dating with this person has just been really slow, really not lusty, like, when people talk about that, like that spark, and it's all this Disney bullshit. That's not it. Like, that is not it, and it's all the like the savior complex stuff around women needing to be saved by men, which is also not it. You need to just fucking save yourself, which thank God I've done, slowly am doing. But like this dating has been really different, and he asks a lot of questions, and I just relinquished control. And when I relinquished control, beautiful things happened. He fucking opens the car door for me. Like, who does that? He cooks, he cleans, he's got his own place. Like, he's kind, he loves his family. Like, there's just so many wonderful things. And he's always consistent, and he's always clear, and I've never had to question, how he feels. And it's been slow. It's been a slow burn, and it's been really beautiful and really nice and really different. And it's not been intense and hardcore. We still only see each other once or twice a week, And that's good. That's really healthy. And it's felt healthy. And actually, the interesting thing is every time I'm with him, I have this sense of calm, like all my anxiety vanishes. And you just think, fuck, that's a nice feeling. That's not how I've ever felt, ever, with any man I've ever dated. I've never felt a sense of calm. And I knew that he would be a person that I could continue dating in about February, when we'd probably dated for 4 or 5 months, and we were cuddling, and he said to me, "This is the safest place in the world." Oh, like, has anyone like that? What the fuck? Like, who is this person and where is he from and how did he get here? And, and I think I was just ready. I was like ready to have that kind of man, like he is truly so masculine. It's wild, but not when you initially look at him. Like, I never would have thought that this would be the kind of man that I would see as the most masculine man I've ever dated. Like, it's wild.
I know completely the same feeling. Like, I think the moment I met my partner, the first time I met him, I rang my girlfriend, who we've been friends since I was 13, and I went, I feel like I've just stepped into the eye of the storm where there's no noise and it's quiet, and I feel really, really peaceful. And she went, that's exactly how I felt when I met my husband. It was none of, like you said, the Disney bullshit where there's the butterflies in the stomach and all the rest of it. It was just this sense of ease, like almost, like when you've got heavy winter coats on and you get inside and you can take them off and you can kick your boots off and you can just kind of go, oh, it's exactly how it felt. And I knew that I didn't have to have eyes in the back of my head and to make sure that, being as a woman, in terms of when you're out and about and you're single and feeling like you need to have eyes in the back of your head and you've got to be constantly aware of your surroundings and what's going on and all the rest of it. It was almost like all of that fight or flight nonsense just all got switched off. And I know that I can be perfectly content and go, I'm happy to go with the flow, babe. You just sort it. I'm good. And that's it. And a bit like you, in terms of, it was a slow burn between jobs, kids, living on opposite ends of town once or twice a week. And everybody's going, but you guys should move in together. And it's like, it's not logistically possible at the moment. And we've only been living together for like a year now into nearly a 6-year relationship. And it's great. It's so lovely to have a man who cooks and who knows how to clean and to do the washing and to just see stuff that needs to be done and just get it done. But also the same going, you okay, babe? And it's the same. It's like, how much battery you got today? I got about this much. How much have you got? I've got about that much. I'll cover it. It's okay. It's just that sort of, it's so radically different from the relationships that, you and I both seem to have found ourselves in. And for anybody listening, it's a really good time to have an examination of where your relationship's at, and is it ticking the boxes for, if you have a really hard, honest look at yourself. Are you playing too heavy on one side and not enough on the other? And are you, like Natasha said before, are you endeavouring to rescue somebody or to fix them or to mother them because there's gaps and holes in yourself, or you feel that's in yourself, that you need to then outpour into somebody else? Relationships are a fabulous litmus test as to the level of healing that we have or we have not done in ourselves. It's a good time to start getting those journals out and start to free write and going, I don't know what the hell to write. I'm not sure what I should be writing. And then all of a sudden, it all it all comes out. But kind of keen to know about your little trip to Bali. Tell us a little bit more about what led you to, we all get those universal nudges, but was yours a constant like flick to go, or was it just like, I think I might want to explore this?
So I've been to Bali quite a few times. I think so. My initial step into Tantra was actually in Sydney, and that would have been, I don't know, 5 years ago now. And that was a fascinating experience. So I went to go see an incredible woman. Her name was Charlotte, and she owns an organization called White Dakini. And I went to go explore a tantric massage with her. And I wanted to do it with a woman because I wanted to be in a space that was really safe, where I knew I wouldn't be performative sexually, right? Because I knew that I had been totally in performance because I'd been in self-sacrifice. So every time I'd have sex with someone, I'd do things that I thought served them, even if I was in physical pain. And so that is the true definition of self-sacrifice, right? And so I wanted to kind of unpack that performative nature and get an understanding of it. So being with a woman was going to be the safest way for me to explore that. And so a tantric massage, like, I think people see it as quite a sexual thing. It's, while they do touch your genitals, it's so not sexual. It's really emotional, right? And so essentially we did a meditation. She asked me, to set an intention, what I wanted to get out of this. And the massage sort of began, started laying on my tummy, and then rolled over onto my back. And, she first sort of starts the massage on sort of the outside of the vulva and then moves to the inside using her fingers and things like that. And it was really interesting because, during the experience, like, I'm paying someone to do this, right? And instead of being in pleasure, I was in pain. And instead of communicating it, I was just like, well, it'll be over soon, in my mind. And then she said to me, how are you going? Is this okay? Do you want me to do something different? And I burst into tears because I had never been asked that before in the middle of a sexual act. I had never been asked, do you want me to do something different? Are you okay? Is this okay for you? And so obviously she stopped, she put her hand on my heart and she said, all right, this is good. Like, we've hit a nerve here. Let's talk about this. What are you feeling? And that was the moment I realized that not only had I been performative, but I had totally sacrificed myself and my body to try to make someone else feel okay. I was trying to control or manipulate their emotional state to make sure they didn't feel rejected by any request that I might have had, any change that I might have had. They wouldn't then feel rejected. And like, that's a childhood thing, right? That's like a trying not to reject, different figures in your life who, you're trying to manipulate the situation to be safe. So that was a really interesting thing. It manifested sexually, although obviously, like, my childhood was so lovely, but it doesn't matter. Like, the things can manifest in your life in such varied ways. And that experience opened the door for me to further look at Tantra. So then I found a course in Bali, which was just 2 days, and it was the fundamentals of Tantra. And it's run by a group called Embodied Awakening, who are actually based in Perth. But they have lots of different things that they run all over the country and in Bali, and I think also in Spain. And it was run by a woman called Tara Megan. And it was so interesting. I've done that course twice now, and both experiences were very different. The first one, I was in that same cycle of sort of desperation to be seen, heard, and chosen. and I had this interesting thing happen to me. So the first thing I learned, let's just go back a little. The first thing I learned about Tantra is that it's about masculine and feminine energies, and that the philosophy sort of says that we all have all of these energies inside of us equally, no matter your gender, sex, or however you identify. But each of these energies have 4 sort of parts to them, which you can kind of think about. It helps us categorize. So natural feminine, divine feminine, shadow feminine, dark feminine. Each of these 4 parts, the same sort of reflects in the masculine. And then you have behaviors that sort of sit within those parts of the energetic system. So, for example, in natural feminine, you have things like care and empathy. And then in divine feminine, you have things like love and life-giving, birth, renewal, compassion. Then in shadow feminine, you have things like manipulation and indecisiveness and things like that. And then in dark feminine, you have this energy of owning your sexuality, this unfuckwithable nature. So you feel women like Rihanna, for example, or Madonna sort of really hold this space of dark feminine. And then in the masculine, you have, the same sort of 4 quadrants, and natural masculine would be things like logic, strategy, direction. And then divine masculine would be things like creating space, safety, and also facing the void. Then in, shadow masculine, you have things like domination and workaholism and aggression. And then in dark masculine, you have ravishing and also owning your sexual desires, and things like that. So that's the energetic system that you can kind of play within in the tantric philosophy. And essentially what it says is that all humans have access to all of these things. And so one of the main sort of questions that they ask in this course was really around, when you're feeling something, let's say, for example, you are feeling really indecisive, or you're in a shadow feminine of manipulation. You want to manipulate your partner, you hint to get the things that you want from them, right? And instead of trying to get that external validation or get that behavior to change, could you ask your own masculine and have a conversation with your own masculine in order to fulfill your own needs? So you could say, I'm in this pattern of behavior, or I'm doing this and it's not working. What can I do to support myself better? And then let your masculine energy answer that for you through your intuition, basically, and listen and allow yourself the time and space to listen and kind of have this conversation with yourself. And so that was a really interesting piece of really having this internal conversation. And then what else was so interesting about this course was that, so I've experienced a lot of sexual shame in the last 6 or 7 years, which manifested for me in genital herpes. So I contracted herpes on a holiday, almost 7 years ago now. And I had felt so much shame about it, and I'd done a lot of work on it. I was 6 years down the path, and had to have a lot of conversations with sexual partners, and constantly was kind of in this cycle of shame, having to let people know, look, I have herpes, and what does this mean for you? And, you may decide that you don't want to have sex with me, and whatever, right? But every time I had that conversation, I was in shame. And I knew it too, but I also knew that I had to push past that, because what was more important was that the person had a choice. And that was really important for me because I didn't. And so, that's kind of where I had got to. But I got this vision when I was at this course in Bali the first time I went. And it was basically of me squatting down in the middle of the circle where everyone was sitting and birthing the shame, like birthing the herpes out of my body, and like howling and weeping in a very animalistic nature that I suppose birth and renewal provides. And then I guess purging this. And I weirdly chose not to do that. Like there was an opportunity for me to stand up and do that, but I was so ashamed that I couldn't allow myself that moment, but I knew what I needed to do. And I chose not to do it. But then I went back the following year and I was in a really different place. And I had also just started dating this beautiful man that I'm dating. And it was so interesting. For the first time ever, I was not focused on the men in the space. I was really just focused on myself because I was dating someone, and it wasn't that we were exclusive yet or anything. We'd only been dating a month or something, but I felt connected to him, and I didn't want to explore anything with anybody else, but I was really ready to explore further into myself. And in making that decision, I strangely had all of these men approaching me that were all of the type of man that I had so desired previously. All these sort of narcissistic, super attractive, men that I had only dreamed of being wanted and desired by these men. And then when I'd said, nah, I'm kind of over that and I'm working on myself and I'm dating this lovely man who's totally different to that, and I'm quite content in that. So I'm really, being introspective in this course. And my God, what a different experience it was. Like, and to be able to look at these men and be like, oh no, you're the old me. Like I'm done with that. I've shredded and like I've got rid of that skin now. And so, it takes 7 years to shed a skin, and I've shed that. And yeah, it was just a really different experience. And I didn't have as much shame. I actually think I've released all of that shame now. So yeah, just fascinating. I really like Tantra as a philosophy, and I like the play of energy, and I like the openness to sexual energy, because sexual energy is healing energy, and when you can access it, you can heal.
I have so many questions for you.
Like
seriously.
We need to do episode 2, right?
Yeah, like seriously. So many things I want to ask you. Because first of all, thank you for being so open
Yes, exactly.
and vulnerable and sharing your story without any shame on here. And I feel that we are both feeling blessed that you are speaking it, your truth, like there's no shame into it. I don't feel that energy anymore. But I'm so curious to know, like, because in my culture, like sexuality is still taboo to speak. Like, from where I come from, like I'm speaking about the Mauritian culture right now, because we still don't talk about it as openly as you are doing right now. Like even like I can't imagine like one of my cousin or my sisters coming to tell me that. Like seriously, I literally can't visualize that. So how would you like suggest to women or even men maybe, like to navigate through that sexual shame like you talk about? That was one question. I can go back in time and I have literally a list of it. It's like Chat GPT does, like it's
so
like
good.
boom, 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 boom. But I'm just going to leave it to that.
Okay,
Leave
let's
that
start with
space
that
to
one.
it.
Okay, so I really enjoy this one process, which is called Existential Kink, which is a book and a philosophy written by Dr. Carolyn Elliott. And it's really worth a read. I've listened to it and I've read it. And this premise that she talks about is fascinating, right? So she kind of plays in the shadow. And she asks this question where she says, if you have this, do you want this? And so this premise of having is evidence of wanting. So when you think about what you have, So, for example, I have herpes. Why do I want this? Right? Because I've created this in my life. And it's a really difficult question, because then you start to unpack, oh, okay, I want this because I wanted to feel shame. Okay, why did I want to feel shame? Oh, I wanted to feel shame because that allowed me to be a victim, or that allowed me to, be all these things, whatever your narrative is. And the funny thing about her philosophy is, she said, the more that you dig into what you want, that you have something, therefore you want that thing, the more you realize that maybe you want that thing because it actually kind of turns you on. That's why it's called existential kink. It's mind-blowing. So when I dug further and further into it, I was like, okay, hang on. Am I turned on by shame? And then I started to play with these ideas of, okay, what do I actually like sexually? Well, I like to be spanked, right? So what does that say? That's related to shame. It's about being a good girl or a bad girl, all of these things, right? So I guess to come back to your question is to ask ourselves, why are we afraid to speak about sex and sexuality? What are we creating? What story, what narrative are we creating about sex and sexuality? What do we have when we reflect on our sex and sexuality with ourselves, with other people? Because even sex with yourself, right? This masturbation, that's even really hard. People can't even say the word masturbate. So I think when you start to uncover all of those things, like I remember as a little girl, so I've literally been masturbating since I was 5, right? And as a very little person, you're not doing it because it's sexual. You're doing it because it's self-soothing, it feels good. You don't really know. And I remember feeling ashamed suddenly because I was fucking masturbating in public all the time. And my mum had to say to me, my darling, like, that's something that you need to do in private. Like, that's okay, but you need to do that in private. But that conversation created a lot of shame for me, even though that was a very kind, really good way to approach that conversation, because you can't have a child fucking touching themselves everywhere. Like, I was doing it on the school mat. I was, in the car, like fucking wild. So, you do have to teach someone that that's not okay. But in the teaching, I experienced shame, which is totally fine and really normal, and something that I just needed to work on and unpack. But in society, particularly for women, we're taught that our sexuality is shameful. Even when you watch movies and stuff, often if you watch a scene where a woman's masturbating, she's masturbating when she's sad or angry, or, and as if we're not sexual creatures. The thing is, though, is that I would say that women are much more sexual than men. Much, much, much more sexual than men. And I think it's been bizarrely flipped because of, the patriarchy, our access to porn, all of these kinds of things, where the narrative is really that the sex is for the man. And the fact that we call our vulvas vaginas it says that we're only talking about the part where the penis goes. We're not talking about the entire anatomy, because it doesn't matter, quote unquote. And so I think for women, it's really around first understanding what your narrative is around sex, like understanding, do you feel shame when you masturbate? Are you feeling ashamed while you're in the middle of a fucking orgasm? Because if that's the case, you really need to unpack why that is, and what your root story is, and all those things, so that you can then unpack that with yourself first. So having good sex with yourself is great. Then you can have sex with a partner and start to reflect on, okay, what are my behaviors here? What am I not saying? Also, particularly for women, one of the most interesting things that I have learned is that when you're an embryo and your body is forming, the the throat and the vagina are layered on top of each other like this. And as the embryo grows, they grow out like this. So the spine sort of forms up the back. And you can actually see the way that the throat and the larynx are formed and the way that the vagina is shaped and formed means that you have the exact same shape, but they were also together. So when the vagina is blocked, for example, with a penis inside it, it can be very difficult for a woman to speak because these two parts were interconnected when we were an embryo. And so when you feel like you can truly open up is when you can probably have better sex. So it's like better communication, better understanding of your needs, able to safely communicate your needs, both with yourself and with a partner, able to safely communicate your sexuality, both with yourself and with a partner, able to sort of face your shame, because I think we all have sexual shame, and you can't necessarily get rid of it, but you can look at it and you can observe it and you can walk around it and you can then embrace it. And in the embracing of it, you can find it a little kinky and a little fun. So anyway, that's a long tangent on your question, but it's a big one.
Oh, I'm
Oh,
going
can
to
we
leave.
can we just hang out and chat forever and a day, because it's fascinating when you start to break things down and have a look at it and go, ooh, there's so many questions I could ask, and we really, really, really need to have you back for at least another one, if not 2 or 3, because I think there's a lot of stuff to dive into with that. But obviously we would love to be respectful of your time, because we know we've only booked an hour of your time today.
Well, let's do it again, because this has been so fun.
This is just like being the icing on the cake. There's still like 10,000 layers underneath of every different colour and flavour that we need to have more conversations on. And my co-host is nodding his head, so I'm sure that we are 2 people speaking with one voice at this present stage in time, that we would love to have you back. The time has just literally gone like that, and it's so nice when we meet people that are of the same mind as us and who are so open to sharing their story and being vulnerable and being of service to other people. And we go, yes, here's another one. We just had another person jump in and go, oh, it's so nice when we connect with people that just get it.
Yeah, amen.
Speak our truths, then we can be honest about who we are and the things that we love about ourselves and the things that we're exploring about ourselves and what that looks like, and going, Christ, I wish I had all this knowledge when I was in my early 20s. The choices that I would have made, but, I signed a contract to do the shit that I've already done, and I'm kind of hoping that the rest of it is going to be as wild a ride, if not better, in this glorious, glorious second season where I get to really uncover who I am, and, I get to share it with amazing humans such as yourselves. So, Dee, do you want to ask Natasha any final questions? Because it's like I could
Final
see you just
questions?
burning. I know that
Like
you
final questions, you mean, like with the S, like oh, so many. Like,
unmute
what do you
yourself,
mean?
'cause
Can you hear? Can you
I
hear?
can now. I can
Yeah.
now.
Okay. So I was saying, like, final questions, you mean? Like, there's so many questions that we can ask.
I
So
know.
I don't know if...
I know. What's a perler for the last question for this episode, at least, anyway.
So when are you coming back?
Whenever you'll have me.
I think
We
like
could
we
just
just...
do a Natasha series. You know
Yeah.
how we did the C series and the S series right
Mm.
back in what feels like 10 million years ago? We
Yeah.
need to have maybe a tantric series. We can go through all the the good
Yeah.
fun stuff.
Yeah.
And get people, shake people up and go, hello, do you know this shit exists? This is really good fun.
I
Totally.
feel like because like even like the four parts of like the masculine
and feminine
and
energy.
feminine, that's
Yeah.
already like a series in itself. And the
Yeah.
tantric, like if we go on, like if we dive deep into that, it will just keep going. And thank you so much, like for being so open. I know Tina love your language because that's her language, so she love it. And I knew it from day one that you two will really connect on that. But it was such a beautiful conversation. It's those conversations you're like, yeah, I don't want it to end.
Yeah.
Because I
Well,
was
thank
not
you.
even checking the time, and until Tina said, and I was like, oh yeah, like really, it flew by. Like I completely forgot, but it was like so many informations in there, but so many nuggets, like we always say. But thank you so much for sharing your story and like for doing your inner work. For doing that level of inner work, it takes guts. It takes really big guts. So thank you so much for doing that. For everyone listening, for having the courage to come and share your story so openly without any shame, without any guilt. And like you said, like before we started recording, that you're still working on yourself. And I love that. I love that people like you, we don't stop, working on ourselves because we are like in a work in progress. And it's
Always.
such beautiful energy that you emanate, from you, that's coming from you, like the balance, the wild, the crazy, but also the calm and poise at time when you're talking about your story. And I could feel every single energy, like, like those energy signatures, you can call it, or frequencies. So thank you so much for coming. We feel really blessed. For me, it's a blessing because I think it's the fourth time we are speaking. So I'm like, yeah, keep coming. Like, no, don't worry, like keep coming. So I don't know if Tina want to leave on last word, or Natasha, you want to share something before we end this conversation today, just for today.
Yeah, I mean, thank you both. It's so nice to speak to just such kind, beautiful, glorious humans who get that life is a total fucking mess. And yeah, I mean, I guess maybe for the listeners, like I always love to ask a question at the end that helps people think about themselves. And the question is, what do you need right now? What do you need right now? Because God, we never ask ourselves what we need. But you've got the opportunity to fulfill your own needs, and that's part of the gloriousness of life.
Perfect. Great question for us for the end of the week on this recording. So it's a good journal question, I think. In terms of it's a good starting point. So wherever you feel comfortable, or voice noting in the car, I always find is a very good one, because then there's that free flow of conversation with yourself and the universe and your guides and whoever else comes along for the ride. But however, unfortunately, our episode has to end today. But we would so love to have Natasha back. But until next time, thank you once again for being your beautiful, amazing self. And we're so looking forward to having you back already, and can't wait to organise another time. But until then, for everybody else, we love you. Thank you so much for sharing your most precious resource, which is your time, with us today. And we look forward to having you again next week on the Divine Couch for the next episode of Shits and Giggles and Good Fun Times. So until then, take good care of yourself and take care of your own needs first. We will follow our guests' excellent advice today. And thank you to my gorgeous co-host for being his divine, beautiful self as always. And can't wait to see you all next week. Ciao for now.
Thank you. I'll see you.
Thank you.